But ultimately, it was this fire that led to the discovery that something much worse had likely taken place. So Oakley Carlson, beautiful little girl. She was born December 6th, 2016 to her biological parents, Andrew Carlson and Jordan Bowers. But before Oakley was even 1 year old, she was removed from her parents' care and placed into a foster home through the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families. But on September 22nd, 2017, her foster parents, Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles, became the center of her world, and she became the center of theirs.
Oakley was a really easy baby and a good baby. I don't think that you would get the sense that she had been abused or neglected before she came to us.
Oakley meant the world to them. And because they knew what she would be facing if she was sent back home, they decided they wanted to formally adopt her. Now, there are many reasons why Oakley was not safe in their home. One of those reasons being that domestic violence was rampant in their house. They were still granted supervised visits with Oakley, and even though it was clear she wasn't being taken care of during these visits, DCYF never stepped in to help. So those unsupervised visits started in October of that year, and one time Oakley came back and told her foster parents something that enraged them. I guess she had been allowed to play a game on Andrew's phone, and at some point Jordan got mad about this, and she hit him right in front of their 2-year-old daughter.
I was watching CoComelon.
Okay.
And Andrew take it.
And then
Okay.
what happened?
And Jordan put him back in his bed.
Did she hit him, Oakley?
Yeah, him dead, like really hard, like.
So less than 2 weeks after this, Jamie Jo sends an email to the social worker talking about her concerns, particularly about the overnight visits that would be starting soon. And they got a response saying that not only is Oakley still going to be placed back in the care of her biological parents, but that it is going to occur by the end of the month. That is exactly what happened. On November 29th, 2019, Oakley was put back in the care of Andrew and Jordan. So as December rolls around, Oakley turns 4, and she went to go visit her grandparents for Christmas that year. But while visiting, it became clear to them that Oakley was not doing well. They said her face was sunken in and that she had scratches and sores on her face as well. On January 27th, someone from DCYF was sent to the Carlson home to check in on Oakley and her siblings as well. And this day would be the last sighting of Oakley by someone that is unassociated with the Carlson family. It blows my mind how everything was handled up until this point, but it only gets worse. And that brings me to November 6th, 2021, when Andrew calls 911 at 4:54 p.m. to report a fire. But he tells the dispatcher that he doesn't actually need anyone sent to help them because the fire is already out. In fact, he says the only reason he called was to make sure to report the fire for insurance purposes. And he tells the dispatcher that the fire started after his daughter Oakley got a hold of a lighter and lit the couch on fire. And according to a GoFundMe that he created, in his own words, he said that he and Jordan fought this fire for hours until they finally put it out, and that they didn't call 911 because they couldn't find their cell phones. Make it make sense. Oh, wait. It doesn't, because fire marshals investigated the scene and determined that the fire did not start on the couch. It started in the kitchen. Specifically, they figured out that it started from the microwave on the kitchen counter, which is a very big discrepancy, if you ask me. But ultimately, it was this fire that led to the discovery that something much worse had likely taken place. So in the aftermath of this fire, the Oakville Elementary School principal, Jessica Swift, went to the home of Jordan and Andrew pretty frequently to drop off some supplies and support them during this time. And she was just doing this out of the kindness of her heart. Her own daughter was friends with Oakley's sister, and so she just wanted to help support their family. But over time, when she would do these visits to the house, she started to wonder why she never saw Oakley. And her suspicions about Oakley were right. And in December, everything started to come to light. On December 4th, 2021, Oakley's sister went over to Principal Jessica Swift's house to have a sleepover with her daughter. And of course, Jessica knew that she had some concerns since she hadn't seen Oakley at the house. And so she decided to ask her sister about it. But the response that she got was like nothing she could have expected. Oakley's sister became visibly scared. she curled up in a ball and began to cry and said, "Oakley is no more. There is no Oakley." And then the next morning, as a mandatory reporter and also a concerned parent, she called Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office and requested a welfare check. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but because of the house fire, Jordan and Andrew and their kids were currently staying at an Extended Stay America hotel in the city of Tumwater, which is a different jurisdiction than Grays Harbor, where their home is located. So when the welfare check was requested, it was actually the Tumwater police that went and conducted it at the hotel. They went on December 6th at approximately 10 a.m. And when the door opened, Jordan was standing there with her 2-year-old son in her arms. And their whole interaction with Jordan, what has been reported, gives me chills. They asked her where Oakley was, and she immediately said she's with her mom. With her mom. Jordan is her mom. And then just a few moments later, Andrew appears at the door, and they ask him, "Where's Oakley?" And he sort of just stands there and stares at them. So they ask again, "Where is Oakley?" This time, Andrew musters up a few words and says that she's with her grandfather, his father. And so they ask for his phone number and address. And he tells them that he doesn't know it. I'm sorry, what? And after they keep pressing him, he eventually comes up with their phone number and address. But that hesitation speaks volumes. So they stepped away at that point to try and verify Oakley's whereabouts. And when they call the grandparents, they tell them that they haven't seen Oakley in a year. A year. The door was then slammed shut, and that's when the investigation into the disappearance of Oakley Carlson began. We do know from court documents that at this point, moments after they left, Jordan factory reset her phone, and that tells you a lot. So clearly, investigators knew something was wrong, and they knew that her parents were likely responsible. So they followed them home and made an arrest. Jordan was arrested for obstructing an officer and suspicion of manslaughter, and Andrew was arrested on only suspicion of manslaughter. So now they only had 72 hours to find enough evidence to formally charge them, and time was ticking. Luckily, though, other investigators had secured a search warrant for their family home, and they began to look for any evidence related to Oakley's disappearance. And inside the home, several disturbing things stood out. For starters, there were clothes and toys in all of the kids' rooms except for Oakley's, and none of Oakley's belongings were found. None of them. And then they found blood spatter on the blinds near the front door and also on the front door itself. And then they also found a bloody handprint in the hallway on the wall. And of course, blood samples were collected and tested. However, at this time, the DNA results are not shared publicly. And luckily, without hesitation, Oakley's siblings were removed from their parents' care and taken in for a forensic interview. And what they had to say is absolutely heartbreaking. When asked about Oakley, her sister said that she didn't have a sister, referring to Oakley. And then she said that Oakley was her sister, but not anymore, because she hadn't seen her in a long time. And then it got even worse. She said that her mom told her she wasn't allowed to talk about Oakley because she had gone into the woods and been eaten by wolves. And as for Oakley's brother, it's been reported that he told them that his sister would be put in a closet, possibly under the stairwell, and that he had seen his mother beat her with a belt. And there was also mention of Oakley possibly being starved by her parents. And over the course of the next 3 days, a handful of agencies, including the FBI, searched the Carlson property, which spanned over 300 acres. Either way, it had been months since anyone had seen her, and the police were asking the public to come forward with any information. But sadly, nothing of value was learned. On December 10th, Oakley's brother and sister were brought into the DCYF office to provide hair samples. And when they were tested, it became clear that both of them had been exposed to high levels of, and her younger brother tested positive for levels high enough to indicate that he possibly may have ingested the himself rather than just being exposed to it in the air. And of course, these findings resulted in the additional charges of child endangerment with a controlled substance in January of 2022. And while they were behind bars, crowds of Oakley's supporters gathered outside Grays Harbor County Jail demanding answers. Jamie, Joe, and Eric themselves gathered alongside supporters and loved ones to advocate for their baby girl, who they desperately wanted to find, and they will not stop until they do. And if you feel heartbroken and frustrated listening to this case, just imagine how Jamie Jo and Eric feel. They have teamed up with a missing persons advocacy group called Light the Way to spread the word about Oakley's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it. Together, they've started petitions, attended DCYF board meetings, and much, much more. In fact, in July of 2022, they held an auction and a dinner and were able to raise almost $50,000 to put towards the reward for information. And now that reward currently sits at $86,000. As of May 3rd of this year, our friends over at NCMEC have released an updated age-progressed photo of what they believe Oakley would look like now. And I really encourage you all to take a few seconds to really look at this image. Forgetting Oakley isn't an option, and her true supporters are not going to stop fighting for her. But that is going to be it for me today. I will be back next week, but until then, stay safe out there.